Now let's get to the reason we're all here tonight. BJ Fogg, he's a PhD researcher at Stanford. I met him actually back in 2007 at his awesome Facebook class that he did. He founded the Stanford Behavior Design Lab. He's the author of Tiny Habits, which is a best-selling book. I'm so glad that his book came out, that he wrote a book and it came out earlier this year. It's got over 1,600 reviews, I think, on Amazon. It's crazy in this amount of time that's done so well. So it's just a testament to how solid his ideas are. You can check him out at bjfogg.com, at Twitter at bjfogg. All right, BJ, let me stop sharing my screen. I'll let you share and then we'll get going. Thanks so much. Welcome.
Good, terrific. I am so glad to be here. I'm going to do the view where I can see many faces. I kind of feel like I'm hanging out with friends. Some of you I know, some of you I don't, but Dan has helped set the tone that this is pretty casual. And what I'm going to share with you today is all about behavior design and how I think about behavior and this new system of understanding behavior and designing for behavior. And it's new. That's one thing about my book, that it's very hard to help people. People say, oh, I've read books about habits before. And it's like, yeah, but everything in here is new. You haven't read this before because it's all my work from the last 20 years. And you've read the old stuff, but now read the new stuff. It's very hard to get that message across. What I'm going to do, and as you're listening to me, feel free to give me a sense of what you're working on. And specifically, what behaviors do you want people to do? Because that will help guide me, especially in the Fireside portion of how to answer questions and help you the most. But this first little intro, and I didn't intend to show slides, and I thought, no, it'll be about 12 minutes. I don't love slides, but I think this will be the most efficient way. So foundations of behavior design in about 12 minutes. My book is not really just Tiny Habits. My book's really about behavior design. And we weren't going to title it Tiny Habits. I'm talking about my agent and publisher and so on. And then we had some other titles. And then it's like, no, let's just call it Tiny Habits. People know that, it's distinct. But it's really about behavior design, which comprises new models, not old models of behavior, but new models. One of the most common models is the Fogg behavior model. New methods for designing things, and I'll show you some of the methods later, and 2 maxims. So look at the very bottom of the screen. These are the most important things. If you're trying to create engagement, if you're trying to have habits that last, if you're trying to create lasting change, those are the 2 keys right there. So the book doesn't hit all the models and all the methods, but it was an opportunity for me to say, hey people, this is what behavior design is. Now, I'm going to share some history of this that very few people know. In 2011, that's when we transitioned from the Persuasive Technology Lab, which I had run since about 1999. And we realized about 2009, 2010, it's like, well, we're not studying persuasive technology and we don't really have any interest in it. We've shifted. We were interested in health habits and the broader view of human behavior. So at a certain point in 2010, we're like, gal, we should change the name of the lab because we don't ever see ourselves going back to persuasive technology. This is the email that I dug up from the archives of the different names we were considering. We were looking at Behavior Design Lab, but we were also looking at other options like Tech for Change, Behavior Design Resource Institute, the B School, not the D School, the B School, etc. And we settled on the Behavior Design Lab. At the time, behavior design was not being used for anything except for there was a PR firm called Behavior Design. They had behaviordesign.com. But nobody else was using it to describe anything. Fast forward to today, a lot of people are calling their work behavioral design. So, but what we call it is behavior design. And when I talk about that, I'm meaning specifically a new set of models, a new set of methods. I'm not talking about the old stuff with a new name slapped on it. And so Tiny Habits, this book gave me the opportunity to lay out behavior design in a way, hopefully, that everyday people could use it to change their own lives. I wanted to include a whole bunch of business stuff in here, and I had a bunch of business, like parallel. Each chapter is like, here's how you would apply this in business. But the book was far too long. And they made me take that stuff out. Even so, it's been recognized as a top business book for 2020 in a number of ways, which is a little bit mind-blowing to me, because it's like, I didn't write this to be a business book. But it can be if you read it carefully, and if you order the business chapter, which is free. There's one little place on a page where it's like, go here and get the free business chapter. We're targeting the most motivated people. Then you get this chapter that unpacks the methods of behavior design. To go super in depth on behavior design with me, you can join my boot camp. So you learn the methods, models, maxims, foundation, and I've modularized it, and it's super fun. But I'm not going to talk much about this today. I'm going to give you a sense of how these things apply. But let me do this. I'm going to talk briefly about the models, the methods, the maxims. I can go in any order. So let's see, Dan, we're going to take a vote. How many people want me to start with the methods first? Raise your hand. How many people want me to start with the maxim first? Raise your hand. How many people want me to start with the models first? Raise your hand. Dan, you are the vote counter. Now we might have to do a recount, but
I think Maxim's won.
Yay, okay, here we go, people. Maxim number 1. Bam. Y'all, I didn't know this. So when I started the Persuasive Technology Lab in 1998, I'd already run experiments about like, wow, computers can change our attitudes and computers can change our behavior. And this is crazy and good and crazy and bad. I did not understand this when it came to products. If you want to create a product that engages people over time, that they continue to use, it needs to be about helping them do what they already want to do. I think back in the day, when I was looking at persuasive technology, it's really how do you change somebody so they change their attitude or change their behavior. I no longer buy into that. In fact, I don't think that's how you create a product or service that engages people. Instead, you have to help them do what they already want to do. And that means, in some ways, it means making it easy to do what they already want to do. If there's any technique that I've preached and popularized, so I'm sort of accused for coming up with this like, insidious playbook of persuasion techniques. That's not true. The technique I've mostly advocated is simplicity. Simplicity changes behavior. That's actually maxim number 3 that I don't talk about very much. But the key here, and when people call me for my help, so I've done now 5,000 phone calls, 15-minute phone calls. I do about 8 a week, and it's added up over the years. I used to do 12 or 16 a week. And I just try to help people, and I hang up the phone and I go to the next one. My partner, he's seen me do this for years, and he's like, why are you doing this? You're not upselling, you're not making money, you're just helping people and hanging up. Well, it's made me a lot smarter because it's really helped me listen for what are they trying to do with this new venture or this new product, and get right to the core issue, and then try to help them before the next call comes in. And this can range all the way from the people in Venezuela that are trying to restore democracy to somebody today that's creating, I probably shouldn't say, well, it has to do with helping people optimize their behavior and be happier. There's a whole range. And what I heard myself saying and recognizing and doing these phone calls was about like, well, why would somebody want to do this? Do people already want to? And that evolved to, oh, wow, are you helping people do what they already want to do? And if the answer is no, it's like, give me one example, just one, of any product or service that has gone big and has been very successful and has engaged people that persuaded people to do things they didn't want to do. Just give me, and I can't think of any example of that. So it seems to be an overriding pattern. It's not about persuading people or manipulating them or getting them to do things they don't. It's like help them do what they already want. And once that dawned on me, it was like, of course. I mean, it's so obvious once you see that, but it wasn't obvious to me, say, for about 10 years. Next maxim. And if you only remember two things from this, remember the maxims and apply the maxims. Boom. Help people feel successful. Notice it's not be, it's feel. I didn't know this 20 years ago. You're designing for emotions. You're designing for the emotional response of success, that they're feeling successful. And that matters because it's that emotion, the feeling of success, that wires in habits. It's not repetition, it's the emotion you experience as you use a new product or service. And it also motivates people to want to use it again. And so if you do those two things, you can be on track. It doesn't guarantee that you have a winning product or you'll engage people, but you're headed in the right direction. If you miss either one, you will not make it. You will not change behaviors in the long term. You will not engage your customers. So that's why I'm saying these two things. In fact, it's the very final thing in my entire book, the final piece of content. I mean, I talk about it through the book in different ways, and I point it out. But boom, about the author page, boom, it's there. It's so important. So I'll probably be doing more work to unpack this. But the maxims, they're not methods, they're not models, they're like guidelines, like not just simple guidelines, but like overwhelmingly important concepts that you need to design for. And so whenever somebody suggests a new feature for an app or they suggest a new product, think, well, does it help people do what they already want to do? And if the answer is no, it's like, bad idea. And does it help people feel successful? And if the answer is no, it's a bad idea. Now, this applies to your own life as well. And Tiny Habits is written for everyday people to transform their life. And so it's help yourself do what you already want to do. That means if there's a habit you don't really want to do, like, oh, I'm going to go run for an hour a day, that's a really bad idea. That's not going to become a habit very readily. Pick habits that you want and then help yourself feel successful. So that's, in some ways, those threads run through every chapter of the book. And those are the keys right there. It's not, those are the most important things. There's all sorts of techniques and old myths about behavior change and habits. And you can really just set all that aside and focus on these two ideas. For example, and then we'll get to models and methods. Some people say that you have to track your habit every day to succeed, to form the habit. That's not true. If it helps you feel successful, then do it. But for so many people, that tracking, if they did the habit every day, that only affirms that they're not being successful. So for that kind of person, on that kind of habit, that's a bad idea. Daily tracking is a bad idea. So I'm coming up with a different way of tracking that I call success tracking. But traditional tracking is not like a universal that everybody must do. Not everybody has to set a goal to change their behavior. Not everybody needs an accountability partner. You can go on with these kind of myths and tradition of behavior change and look at them through the lens of the maxims. And for some people, setting a goal will help people feel successful. And for some people, it will scare them and they won't even want to do it. So the maxims are the universals, and everything else, either the products, the features that you're looking at, or your own change, you can look through the lenses of the maxims. So if you have to go now, you're excused. I covered, I think, hopefully the most sweeping and powerful principles in the book. But now I'm going to shift to either the methods or the models, and this will be briefer. Dan, which one comes next?
Well, I think it was the models.
Yeah, models are ways of thinking, and I'm going to stop this. And I mean, I think maybe all of you have seen the Fogg behavior model. This is the cornerstone model for the rest of behavior design. I did change since I last talked here. It used to be trigger, now it's prompt. Apologies to everybody out there that used the model that said trigger, sorry. But prompt is better. Triggers was ambiguous. And this model is, there's just so many fun ways you can use it. And it helps you, well, let me go quickly through what's unique about this model. And this model, the pieces came together for me in 2007. It didn't all come at once, but little by little, and it was like, there it is. And there are 5 things that this model does that no other model does. I'll go fast. It shows that motivation and ability have a relationship, and the technical term is compensatory. And that's what the action line shows. So if motivation is weak, so let's say motivation is very low, you can still be above the action line if ability is strong or if it's easy to do. So motivation, ability, function, you can trade one off for the other. Neither can be 0. If either one is 0, the behavior won't happen. But I don't know of any other model that accounts for the fact that if something's really hard to do, then guess what? You have to have high levels of motivation. If something is really easy to do, motivation can be high or low. And we experience this all the time in our everyday life. So that's one aspect. Number 2, motivations can be conflicting. Part of you wants to wear a mask, part of you doesn't want to wear a mask. So you're motivated to wear a mask and you're demotivated to wear a mask. If you go to behaviormodel.org, and if we have time, maybe I'll show some videos. I show how the behavior model can be used to understand how a behavior happens over time. And that's the most important use of the model. The one that's printed in the book, the one that's on the poster is just like a snapshot in time. And that's not really behavior, at least not the important type of behavior. The important type of behavior, what happens over time. And so one of the things these videos show is how motivation shifts, how things get easier, how you have something like mask wearing where you're motivated to do it and there are demotivators, and how that works over time. Next, the importance of making something easy to do. If something is really easy to do, then you don't have to rely much on motivation. And that's what, on the very far right of the model, that's what it's showing. You have all this area above the curve if something's really easy to do. It was that insight. This is important enough for me to go stop sharing the screen. So if something is really easy to do for a given behavior, then your motivation can be high, low, it can't be 0. And it was looking right here on my own graphic one day where I was like, oh my gosh, that means if the habit is really, really easy to do, that I don't have to worry so much about motivation, where if it's really hard to do, then as soon as my motivation sags, I'm not doing it. Oh. And it's very hard to keep motivation high. So that's what then started me hacking my own behavior, flossing 1 tooth, putting on 1 drop of sunscreen, doing 2 push-ups, not 20. And then the other pieces came together for the tiny habits method. It was just looking right at that graphic. Simplicity changes the behavior because as humans, our motivation goes up and down, and we don't have tons of control over that. What we can do is make sure something's easy to do. Next, the timing of the prompt matters. Oh, we're going to go back to the poster here. So for any given behavior, let's say donating to Save the Reef Foundation in Maui. So Save the Reef Foundation. We'll go with Frog since he likes water more. Frog is not just in one place in the landscape. He or she is shifting around. Let's say Frog got a huge pay raise. Well, now Frog is more capable of donating. It's easier to do. Let's say Frog loses his or her job. Now it's harder to do. Let's say Frog watches a documentary about the importance of the reef, motivation goes up. So somebody's floating around this landscape. And what you want to do is prompt them when they're above the action line, not when they're below. So that's where the timing thing comes in. Now, if you have a population, You want to prompt that population when the most people are above the action line. So you can think of that as like a circle over here, and then where's the circle relative to the action line? There's some other more nuanced ways of talking about this, including in the book. But my point here is the timing of the prompt matters, because you recognize that Fogg is not always at one level of motivation or ability for donating to save the reefs. It's a dynamic thing. Our motivation shifts, our ability shifts. And then the final point will be, oh, yeah, this is much harder to show, and this is maybe just me being happy about this. The model can apply to an individual like Fogg. It can apply to groups like all animals in Maui, or to populations, like the population of whales. I mean, human populations, right? So you can use it at different levels of analysis. And there's some super fun ways to use the model. And I love training people in that. Okay, let's go to steps. I'll be brief here. There are a set of steps in the book. Notice the pattern is the first few steps are about selecting what is the behavior that, what habit do I want? The next step is about designing it. And the third step is about implementing and iterating. Those are the book steps. Well, the pro steps that I teach in my boot camp and that I've taught for years in my boot camp look different. But notice it's the same pattern. There's a selection set of steps, like what are we designing for? What specific behaviors? Design, and there's testing. And so now I'm going to show you how they relate. First step is basically the same. Second step, different wording, but it's basically the same. The next step, this is where it differs. My book only has one paragraph on what I call crispification. It's making the behavior specific. It's probably, when you look at the flaws in the book, it's probably one of the top 3 flaws. I could have a whole chapter on it. It's really important, but the book there just wasn't room. So there's only one paragraph, unfortunately. But step 3, matching and focus mapping, and in the pro steps, same idea. And then a big difference is in the book, the next steps are about habits, people creating individual habits. Whereas in the professional steps of behavior design, it's not always about individual habits. It's a wider, and I don't want to say it's more complicated. It's a more powerful set of steps. But the thing in the green box, that's the tiny habits method. Start tiny, find a prompt, celebrate. Whereas in the pro steps, they're similar in intent and outcome, but it's not the tiny habits method alone. So that's how you can shape. So you can, read tiny habits, use those steps, but understand that there's a slightly different set of steps for professionals creating products and services. And there you have it. So that's behavior design, maxims, models, methods, and they work together. There's a connection between the methods and the models. There's a connection between the maxims and the other 2 things. So I will stop there. Dan?
One thing, everyone loves these cards, myself included. I'm wondering if you'd be okay for people that maybe aren't as familiar with the model, just holding it up and explaining it real quick. If just like,
how about if I draw it out? How about if I draw it?
Even better.
Okay, so here's what. I'm going to give you permission. If you want to get out your mobile phone and record me, I'll give you, as long as you don't publish it. And here's why. The skill of teaching this in 2 minutes or faster is the most important skill that you learn in the professional boot camp with me. So I'm giving it to you now. Why is it the most important skill? Because you can get up in a meeting, whether it's a product meeting or let's say a Girl Scout cookies meeting, and say, getting people to buy Girl Scout cookies is a behavior. Let's understand what a behavior is. So in 2 minutes, you can explain it. And then everybody's thinking clearly about behavior, and everybody's talking clearly about behavior. So what I'm going to explain, and you can time me, you can start about now, is I'm going to explain the Fogg behavior model. And if you want to video me, that's fine. Just don't exploit it. So behavior happens when 3 things come together at the same moment. There's motivation to do the behavior, there's ability to behavior, and there's a prompt. and the prompt is the call to action, the reminder. I used to call it a trigger. And you can visualize this in 2 dimensions. Along this axis, you have level of motivation to do the behavior. And let's say it's donate to Save the Wreath Foundation. And somebody can be anywhere along this. Frog is super concerned up here, monkey less concerned down here. Along this axis, can you still see that? Yeah. You have the ability to do the behavior. That's how hard or easy it is to do. This side is high ability, but you write it up as easy to do. Same thing as high ability. And this side is hard to do. And high motivation is here, low motivation is here, and these are continuous variables. So for any given behavior, let's say this person for donating to Save the Wreath, they're super motivated, and it's easy to do. When prompted, this person will donate. High motivation, easy to do. When prompted, they donate. In contrast, let's say this is monkey, doesn't care about the wreaths, and monkey's broke. When prompted, monkey does not do the behavior. So the action happens here, action doesn't happen here. There is a threshold line here that I call the action line. And if somebody is anywhere above this line when prompted, they donate, they do the behavior. If someone is anywhere below this line when prompted, they don't. So that's the model right there. Behavior happens when somebody is prompted, when they have a combination of motivation and ability that puts them above this conceptual action line, and they don't do it down here. So that's the model. That was probably about 2 minutes and 10 seconds, I think.
It was 2 minutes and 2 seconds, or 1 second.
Okay, there we go. I went with that. So that's it. So I do have the script in my book, but you could also watch it, and then you could practice with your friends. Or, by the way, people that teach this to their kids, I get good reports from that, where their kids get it, and then their kids discuss it. And it really helps you in your household. It's like, why didn't you pick up your clothes? Well, I didn't have a prompt. It was not a motivation problem. It was not ability. I just needed a prompt or something like that. It really helps you talk about behavior that's happening in your household, as well as in your company or in the other communities you belong to.
I prompt my kids to pick up their stuff all the time when they don't do it. So this helps me diagnose it. I know they're able, and I give them prompts, so it's got to be a motivation problem then.
Well, let me give a true story that a friend of mine in South Africa did. So she wanted her kids, she has 2 boys, to pick up their clothes and put in the hamper in the room. And she would nag and nag and nag. Guess where nagging fits? They didn't want to do it, even though it was easy to do. This is where nagging lives. This is nagging. And if you nag enough, you might get them over the action line. Not that they want to do it, but to get rid of the nagging. But she found a better way. Because she had read my book, she's like, well, what do my kids already want to do? And she says, well, my boys love throwing things. They love to throw things. So she went and she got like a basketball thing with a hoop and put it over the laundry bin and said, hey, boys, I'm going to help you throw things. So when something's on the floor, see if you can throw it into the hamper. And she called me and she was so excited. She called me from South Africa. She was so excited. She's like, oh my gosh, it's totally working. I'm like this miracle mom. I got my boys. So it's, helping them do what they already want to do. And in this case, it was a reframing. So I actually call this behavior a queen bee behavior. That's opposed to a swarm of bees behavior, and then in the queen bee behavior, you either pick a different behavior or you align your behavior with the motivation they already have. Because they weren't motivated to have the house be tidy, but they were motivated to throw stuff. So that's a little bit of a detail. You wouldn't explain that in 2 minutes, but you can teach this in 2 minutes and then sit back down with your team or your Girl Scout cookie group and go, okay, now to sell more cookies, is it a motivation issue, an ability issue, or a prompt issue? And maybe it's, 30% it's motivation, 40% it's ability, and 30% prompt. And you can segment in some ways pretty quickly from this. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's great. Cool. Okay. All right. So with that, why don't we jump in and we can do our fireside chat. All right. And we have some questions. And, as I was writing up the questions, I was reflecting that I first met you back in 2007 when you taught the one and only Facebook app development class at Stanford. So I remember, I was heavy here in Silicon Valley in the tech scene, and we were all excited because Facebook had their conference. They announced we're going to open up an app ecosystem, and everyone was all excited. And I was really impressed that you scrambled and put together a class like that fall, like just a month late, like within a month or two after that announcement. And I gave a guest lecture there on product management and viral loop optimization. And for people that might not be familiar with that, I think it was a very special experience for everyone that was involved. Can you just tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so I was doing the quick story. I was doing a startup that was failing for a few reasons. One, it was ahead of its time. It required a microphone on a computer. So we really became a company that helped people install microphones, which was not our point. But anyway, it was kind of failing. And then I reached out to Facebook and said, hey, let's partner. I've got a really, really cool application. You've got a, and they said, sure, come on in. So I went in and they said, hey, we're doing this thing called Platform. And sign this non-disclosure and you can be part of F8. I'm like, what is F8? That led to me being there. So we got our stuff, we tweaked it, we were there on the floor demoing at the first F8, and we did okay, but I saw that some companies did incredible. They got like 1 million new customers within a week and stuff, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. I wanna teach a class on this. So I went, I'll name names. I went to Terry Winograd, who was overseeing my teaching and stuff at the time. And I said, I want to teach this class on this new thing. For the first time, you have an ability to create something, put it into an existing social system, and get feedback, get metrics. The metrics are just once a day, but it hadn't existed before. And you could get qualitative feedback almost instantly. So I was like, finally, the loop is closed. This allows you to iterate. And so I was like, I want to teach this. And Terry's like, I don't know. Because it was in the time of MySpace and child predators. And I was like, no, this is really important. This is a big deal. And so Stanford, you can be really flexible at Stanford. So pulled the class together pretty quickly, got a lot of people to help me. Dan, thank you so much for showing up. I don't really think I did much, except for I was just like, I was the person I think that pretty much I was like the COO, I guess. I just made sure everybody showed up. I mean, I just had to check all the academic boxes. We're issuing grades, and it was the students and the guests like you, Dan, that brought in the real insights. And then the students just knocked it out of the park. We did a presentation in December. And like 600 people showed up at the Alumni Center from all over Silicon Valley to hear it because the students had engaged 10 million people within 10 weeks. Some of the students didn't do very well that quarter, so I allowed them to extend to the next, they got an incomplete. And so about a third of the students killed it. Another third of the students signed up to continue. And then by the end, when I stopped tracking things on the dashboard, the students overall had engaged 24 million people since, and we wrapped it up at Valentine's Day. And I think that showed me that what the students did in the first push wasn't an accident. There was a systematic way to enter into this space, create engaging apps, and so on. And then that window closed, because they exploited my students and others early on found these ways to do things that Facebook shut down. And I don't think that's really available today, but it did. It exhausted me, Dan. I don't know if you know this, but people said, oh, now do one on MySpace or Twitter. And it's like, I am so tired. This has been so exhausting because I had like 75 students and I was the one that was academically responsible for everything.
Right.
And it was a Wild West. But I'll just end with this. As soon as that wrapped up, and so it was like March and I was catching my breath, I was like, oh my gosh, we've seen how powerful this can be. My next class was behavior design for world peace. So immediately my thought was not about monetizing that, but wow, if you can reach millions of people and influence them in this new way, let's pick the hardest problem out there. And that led to a class that we call Peace Technology that morphed to Peace Innovation. It then led to a new lab at Stanford called the Peace Innovation Lab. And now there's a headquarters in The Hague on that front, and they've continued. But that was my natural response to, man, this is crazy powerful. What are we going to do with it? Yeah. Now, we didn't solve the problem of world peace, but I think we made some interesting inroads on that. Stay tuned.
That's cool. That's great. That's great. Yeah, I remember just meeting all these talented people that were in the class, and then I'd bump into them. I was living in Palo Alto, so I'd bump into them after the class on University Avenue, like, hey, what's going on with your app? You know, and one of the things I recall happening was, you know, the product lifecycle of most products, web products, they're like years, right? And these guys are like, yeah, you know, we did really good for a couple months, but then like it died. I'm like, well, it's like fruit flies. These apps, the lifespan of these apps can be really short. They can like crush it. And then it's like, yeah, people got bored and stuff. I don't know. Did you see that dynamic?
Yeah, exactly. But then the students learned, like theirs was peaking. And so they would then get their users to the next one. So they learned how to ride those cycles. Right. And they also cooperated with each other. They shared code, they shared techniques. So it really was, we set it up that it wasn't a zero-sum game. It was like, well, we set it up. It's like, I'm going to grade you against everybody else shipping apps into the ecosystem. And all of you can get A's or all of you can get F's. If you get F's, I get an F too. And the students were like, well, those are professionals, the full-timers. And I was like, I don't care. Drop the class if that's, because how else am I going to grade this? I had to grade on their performance. And so it really was in their best interest to work together and collaborate. And it turned out that way. I kind of just got out of the way. I mean, frankly, it was just monitor, make sure they didn't burn the building down, make sure we, you know, did the right things from an academic perspective, but just let them go and get out of the way. And so there's been really too much credit given me on that. The credit I get is to be foolish enough, or I guess brave enough, to just do a class on the topic.
Yeah, you enabled it by by scrambling. I mean, that was super fast. We all know academia isn't always that fast, and scrambling quickly and pulling together a set of people. It was an emerging field. So like even viral loop acquisition, there weren't that many people that had done it. I did it at Friendster. That's why I had experience. There weren't that many people that had it, and then it became like an emerging field. So I think you definitely, you know, I appreciate what you're saying.
I think ultimately, Dan, you're probably get more credit for helping the students succeed in terms of metrics than me. I mean, I really felt like I was the sign director trying to keep everybody in line. Sort of thing.
What I didn't realize is you actually graded in an empirical way like that. I think that is amazing as a results focused business person. I think that's awesome. So what was the metric that they had to do? Active users, or what was the deal?
Yeah, it was daily active users compared to all the other apps in the ecosystem.
Right.
And I always have run my classes that way, even if there isn't something so objective like that. I'm like, look, here's your final, here's what you're going to do. I'm going to get outside industry people to evaluate you, and that's going to be most of your grade. And I like that because, one, it positions me as a teammate with the students. And two, it's like, you're going to get unbiased, real feedback. And that's how the world works, people. So, and people in industry have been very cooperative and given their time to give really great evaluation to the students. And so I've always tried to do that. It's like, it's not my opinion whether you got a good grade or a bad grade. Let's go and get, an outside measure that isn't based on whether I like you or not.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, cool. Yeah, and it's interesting because what I realize every once in a while, there's a new platform that emerges. And this was like the Facebook app platform emerged. And so there was an opportunity. It was the Wild West. There were all these hacks you could figure out until they started and I feel like in general, any new platform like Twitter comes out and eventually people catch wind and then people start spamming and marketing. And so then it kind of has a life cycle as well, right? So, and then I guess another platform would be like iOS or something. So did you ever think about doing a class for one of these other emerging platforms?
Yeah, a lot of people were telling me to, and I was like, this was so exhausting. I mean, because it was number of students, the help they needed from me. When one student did a thing called, I forgot what it was. It was like, choose your partner or something like that. And then when his thing started growing, 2 million people, the company that had the trademark on, choose your partner started suing him. Somebody did an app on Oregon Trail, blatant copyright violation. So I had to help like signpost and help these students like try to get out of. It was exhausting, and I really think I hadn't thought of this before. That led to the Peace Innovation class, and then I think I did a persuasive video class because I loved the power of video, and then I was done with it. Then it was health habits, and so I think it really was my exhaustion and just like seeing the power of that and just saying, okay, I've done my job here. I've testified to the FTC about the dangers of all this stuff. I've written book chapter one conferences on all the challenges. I got to move on, and cool. Health habits were the next thing I was doing.
Good. The next time you can co-teach with the law school, it sounds like, so they can take care of all that IP stuff for you. Right?
Oh, that tires me out. I'd have to take a long sabbatical.
Cool. Okay. Well, I think the other thing is, I love your model and its predictive power. I would love to hear the origin story. Can you share how you got to that aha moment of like figuring out the model?
There were a few, but I remember doing some work for eBay in about 2002. And they brought me in to do what they called site user assistance, which is basically customer support, but they were calling it site user assistance. So I went in to help optimize it. And that's when I said, okay, you got motivation level of the customer, ability level, and I played around with that. And I created a framework called the Diamond of User Emotions, which I don't talk about, but I still think it's a nice one. And then I had to give a talk in like Brussels on something. And I told them I was going to talk about hot triggers because I knew triggers was part of it. And like some of us don't do this, people. I'm on the plane, I still haven't written the talk. I'm in Brussels sitting there, and the next morning's talk, and I still haven't finished it. I'm like, crap. So then I got busy, and then the piece clicked in, and I got a couple hours sleep. And I went and said, okay, here's how it all relates together. And that's when the pieces came together. So it went stepwise. And yes, like many things, there was a forcing function where it was like, I said I was going to give a talk on this tomorrow. I got to deliver. And so then the pieces, now the first academic publication of the behavior model looked like this. It did not have the curved line. I talk about the threshold, but I'd drawn it up like this, and this was increasing likelihood for the behavior to happen, which is true.
Right.
But in about a year, 2 years, as people started grabbing this and putting it in their blog posts, I remember somebody was writing about, creating engaging customer experiences. She or he said, hey, our customers start here and then they move here. And I was like, no, that's not what the arrow's not time. The arrow's likelihood. And I saw that happen a few times. So then I went to my lab manager, Tana, and I said, we've got to scrub this off the internet. People are misinterpreting this, and we're going to go with the action line now. So I shifted to make the visual the action line. So now this is a thresholding model.
Right.
It will happen, it won't happen. This is a likelihood model.
Yeah.
They're both accurate, but it turns out for designing things, for troubleshooting things, the thresholding model is better than the likelihood model.
It's like a probability gradient, basically, huh?
Exactly.
Got it. Nice. Very cool. That's very cool. Nice. Cool. Awesome. That's great. And it sounds like because I remember seeing you speak back in the day, and yeah, you had a little card and the blue, like the green and the purple, and it was T for triggers. I remember that.
And on the other side of the card, I had the behavior grid,
right,
which is like the periodic table of elements, but for behaviors.
Right.
And Dan, it was probably before I spoke for you, I think I realized the audience would just fall asleep when I showed that. Like, how exciting if I put up like the periodic table of elements. People yeah. And so it's important to have, but then I switched it out. Okay. And now on the back of my card, in addition to the behavior model, I have this one. This is a really important model. It shows the relationship between the abstract outcome and specific behaviors. So I swapped out the boring one to, like, I give out worksheets. Like they could just fill that out like a little handy practical worksheet.
Got it. Okay, I'm gonna hold on to that card that I got then. It sounds like it's
Collector's item.
on eBay. It's gonna be worth something one day. Good. Okay, cool. Awesome. And then I've been following your work since 2007. It's obviously solid, rigorous, it's applicable. And so I was super excited when you wrote your book, Tiny Habits. Came out earlier this year. We were actually talking about trying to get to coordinate to speak then, and things were kind of crazy, and then COVID happened. It's got over 1,600 reviews in like less than a year of being out, with a 4.7 out of 5-star average rating, which is huge. I mean, you just don't see that. And then the audiobook, which you read, which is awesome, which I listen to audiobooks, so I listened to the audiobook version, which is great. It got featured on Audible the other day, and I think it got as high as number 2. Is that right, BJ? Or?
Yes, Matthew McConaughey, however you say his name. He is number 1. But yeah, I don't know why Audible picked me. I'm so glad they did. So the preface is about 15 minutes. It's not in this book. It's only in the audiobook, because I'm talking and sharing the challenges I had with my speaking voice. Yeah. And that preface was so personal. I narrated it here in Maui. I'd go to some a music professor's home and sit in his studio and narrate. And I wrote the preface that morning because I hadn't planned to do it. It was the last day, and I was like, okay, I'm going to write this, see where it goes. So I write it up. I take it out to the living room. My partner's there, and I'm like, hey, Denny, let me read this to you, because I think I'm going to record this for my audiobook. And I start to read it, and I like cry, and I break down, and I'm like, I'm sorry. And then I keep going, and I cry again. I like broke down 3 times because I'm sharing this really traumatic thing and a transformation that happened to me. And I'm like, whew. And he hadn't heard some of these things. I mean, we've been together like 25 years, and he hadn't heard some of it. It's like, yeah, what do you think? Should I share this? And he's like, yeah. So on the reading, I got through it. I didn't like cry, and I don't think, I'm feeling lots of emotions when I read it, but I hide some of it. But yeah, just go listen to that. And I think it ended up to be, and part of having like the book go to number 2 was, even if people didn't buy it, they could hear that preface, which really was about me sharing something that really, where I felt like my body was betraying me. I felt like I was being shamed in public for something I had no control over. And then that I was able to chip away at it and not get perfect, but get good enough where I was serviceable. And the victory, and that's kind of the point of the preface, is I won my audition to narrate my own book. I was competing against professionals, and it was so important to me that I used my own method of Tiny Habits to practice every morning for a year to prepare for my audition. And then so when they said I could do it, the fact that I could narrate my own book, when you hear more of the preface, you'll see why it was a massive personal victory. And people have really, a lot of people have reached back out, because everybody has struggled with things, and some things are private and some things are public, but everybody has struggles, and some people have lots of them. And I think to hear somebody really, at this point, yes, I know how to create habits, and yes, my life is going well, and all that kind of stuff, but understand it wasn't always that way, and we all have challenges. Even now I have challenges, but now there's a system, there's a way to figure out what habits am I going to create, and how am I going to do it, and I can do that quite reliably. And that's kind of the point of the preface, is there's a method now for you to take whatever challenge that seems impossible in your life, break it down, focus, design it by tiny habits, and feel successful all the way along. So that was a long answer to your question, Dan.
No, but I think that help explains why it has over 1,600 reviews and 4.7, is because that's the power of it. you can transform your life or transform whatever you're doing, which is great. And I do listen only to Audible pretty much, and so I heard that preface and I thought it was very powerful. I didn't know about it, and it was a very impressive story. Well, the reason I want to set that up is just to kind of get what led you to write the book. I'm like, everybody, it's a lot of work, as we know. So I'm just curious, what was your M? What was your M? And
well, the motivation built over the years. But if you really want to rewind, the M is I was raised Mormon in California. I was third of 7 kids in like the perfect Mormon family in Fresno, California, and went to seminary every morning and went on a Mormon mission to Peru and all that, and all my ancestors were Mormons. And you're just raised with this sense of you are here to serve others. That's just that's how I was raised. You're here to serve others, and service is what you're here for. And any gift you have, you're obligated to share and use that for good in the world. And so even though I didn't maintain being Mormon because I'm gay and that doesn't really work, that is still built into me. And so when I first had the insight that computers could be used to persuade, my natural instinct was, wow, it can help people be healthier, it can help people build relationships and so on. That was my driver for doing that work. And then fast forward to Tiny Habits years later, once I knew it was working for me, I was like, let me share it. And then then the motivation started coming through Twitter. Where's your book? Where's your book? Where's your book? For years, until one day, and I kept thinking, I'm too busy, I'm doing this research, I'm innovating here. It was almost like I felt stuff was coming to me, or I was discovering stuff. It was like a faucet, and I knew a book was a serious commitment, and I felt like I'd have to turn off that faucet of discovery and innovation and research, and I may never be able to turn it back on. I think that was my fear. So I just kept going. It's like, grab while the getting's good. There's all this stuff to learn and do. And then one night I had a dream, and this is in the last chapter of the book. I had a dream that I was on a plane. The plane was going to crash. And I won't go into all the details, but I was fully convinced I was going to die in the dream. And my reaction in the dream, and I thought it was real, was not fear. It wasn't, oh my gosh, this is going to be painful. And it wasn't like, what's going to happen to my partner who wasn't on the plane with me. It was regret. It was deep regret. That I'm not yet, I'm going to get emotional here. It was regret that I hadn't yet shared what I had learned and what I had been given in a form that anyone could access. Yeah, you could take my Stanford class. Yeah, you could come to my boot camp. You could read my tweets carefully, but it still wasn't pulled together. And so I woke up and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that was a dream. But then the next morning I told my partner, I said, I had this dream and this was my reaction. And then it was just crystal clear that I've got to push the research innovation. I just have to prioritize this book. And that my agent, Doug Abrams, I had agents and publishers reaching out to me. It's like, no. But then Doug came along, and Doug was the perfect agent for me. So it just lined up. So it really took a dream or a nightmare to wake me up and say, you got to prioritize the book. And that's what led to the actual book. Yes.
And that was the prompt, the P. You always had the ability, so it's just the prompt. That's all you had.
It was very clarifying in terms of prioritizing. So
good. Cool.
There you have it. Sorry.
Good. Oh, it's good. I love the origin story stuff. That's good. Let's transition to, our meetup has a lot of product focused people. How can product teams use your frameworks and advice to design and build better products? What advice would you have for them?
Yeah, I'll be quick. I'll just give you the high level. First of all, use the maxims. Always be thinking, is this helping people do what they already want to do? Not helping us as a company make money or get engagement, but are we helping people do what they already want to do? And are we helping people feel successful? Bam, first. Next, the methods. One of them is magic wanding. It's a brainstorming method, but it's better than average brainstorming. So, and this is, get the business chapter, it's free. And I give you some training on using the methods. And then the model, teach the behavior model. And even if you only do this without the graphic, this is good. Because you can say, we want people to do a behavior. Let's say we want them to turn on our ability to see their location. So I'm working with a company right now, and it's important to know location. Well, if they're not saying yes to that, you don't start with motivation. You actually start with, are we prompting them? Are they being prompted? You start with prompt. This goes also with, like, let's say your spouse isn't showing up to pick you up from work or something. Usually people would just get upset. That's motivation. Start with the prompt. Make sure there's a reminder for your spouse. Make sure there's a prompt for your customer. Then if it's still not happening, your next step is to go to ability. How do we make it easier to do for your customer or your spouse? How do you make it easy? And most of the time, this will solve the problem. If it doesn't, you're not helping people do what they already want to do. Because if you have to go to motivation, that means they don't already want to do it. But there are times when you need to get them to do the behavior, maybe they don't totally want to do, or their motivation shifts, then you end up here. So even just this tells you how to troubleshoot a behavior, and you start with prompt, then ability, and then you land on motivation. And if you have to motivate your spouse to pick you up, then you might want to pick a different behavior or find somebody else. I mean, it's hard to create a habit in anybody if they don't want to actually do it. So if you can switch out the behavior and say, hey, somebody else is going to pick me up, or I'm going to ride my bike or whatever. So there is a troubleshooting order. And then when you get to, if motivation is truly the problem, in other words, if you're here, then you have a decision to make about, do we pick a different behavior, or do we manipulate motivation? And I go into the book a little bit on this, on conflicting motivations and competing motivations, and how, if you need to, you can change motivation level. But ideally, you're matching people with the behaviors they already want to do.
Great. Awesome. Cool. Well, that's good about that order too. Quick trip, like start with prompt, then ability, then motivate. That's good. I'm gonna start applying that. That's good.
Valerie asked a question. What's the line between prompting and nagging? It's great. The difference is whether I want to do it or not. I mean, there's lots of behaviors. Like, let's say, for example, I finish this and I walk out into our living room and Denny says, hey, have you called your mom? Oh, no, I haven't. I wanted to, and I can. Thank you for prompting me. So that wouldn't be a nag because I want to do it. However, if he said, hey, did you categorize your expenses for your taxes? And if he said that night after night, I'd be like, I'm doing it this weekend, Denny, okay? Stop nagging me, because I don't love it. I don't want to do that. So that's the difference, is the level of motivation. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, we just have a couple questions, then we'll open up the audience Q&A. One was, I'm sure like a lot of people here have seen the movie The Social Dilemma. It caused a lot of, kind of news and feedback. And I just wanted to see if we could get your thoughts or opinions or reaction to it.
Yes. Oh, I absolutely agree with the overall aims of the film. Absolutely. In fact, some of the testimony I gave to the FTC in 2006, so they came to me, and this was the very year that Mike Krieger was a student in my class. During the 10-week period, that's when the FTC said, hey, come tell us, what are the dangers ahead with technology? And in that same class was Tristan Harris, in the very same class that year. So it was kind of this crucible. So I created a video with the help of some of the students. Mike Krieger helped me with this video. And we mapped out 3 problems. One was that our data about what persuades us is being collected, and it will be used against us. Boom, boom, boom. And I did mention elections. And I didn't realize that till 10 years later, after Cambridge Analytica. I listened to it again. I was like, oh crap, I did say governments and elections. I talked about people manipulating videos so you can't believe your eyes. There was no name for it back then, but now we call it deepfakes. And the third area was about using games to change people's mental models and so on. So I gave that testimony in 2006. Nobody cared. I didn't get a single follow-up. But I still was talking about the ethics and so on. So it was very, very painful for me to see a cameo of myself in The Social Dilemma. And it came from this video clip. So Tristan's talking about being at the lab and stuff, and they're leading into all these manipulation techniques I have nothing to do with. and they show a clip from this video. Notice the title of the video. This was 2011. I'm talking about health habits here, but they picked the very start of this video.
Now, many of you in the audience are geniuses already. I think that's true, but my goal is to turn you into a behavior change genius.
Boom, and they cut there, and they imply that's me teaching students about social media and how to addict people to social media. So when I see this, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's totally deceptive. I'm speaking to health professionals, and I'm helping them create products to make people healthier and happier. But yet it was used in this way. So, and then it goes on to imply things about the like button and scroll that have nothing to do with. So I'm really mixed on that. It's unfair. I think it's an important message, but the fact that they would deceive people in an important film like that, and the fact that they use me, my clip, to deceive people, that's lame. Bam. So probably not what people are expecting to hear from me, but that's just the truth. There you have it.
Oh, well, I'm glad you got to kind of clear the air on that. You know, we all know, I know some people that have like been edited in certain ways by Hollywood, or, you know, and they can make it seem like whatever they want. So cool. Well, let's switch to something more positive. And let's talk about what are your latest areas of research? You know, the model's like old. BJ, what do you got for us now? Come on.
Oh my gosh. So I started a research lab inside Tiny Habits. So people that want to be super pro with Tiny Habits and use the method in depth, we have a training for that. That's different than my boot camp training. And so I've now started a Tiny Habits research lab. And there we're doing some really great work about expressing gratitude as a way to increase hope. We're looking at, I don't want to give details, but a classic health behavior change that has been a problem for years, and we're making progress there in a good way. And also looking at, I have at least 500,000 data points about habits that haven't been analyzed. So I have a team that's analyzing those data points and getting more insights into habits and the Tiny Habits method. In the Stanford lab, we also have 3 projects going. Before I hit those 3, I'm also doing a project with Stanford Medicine where we're helping older adults who are depressed overcome their depression by using the Tiny Habits method in conjunction with another method called behavioral activation. So the founder of that method and I are both on this project, and it's going slow. I like doing things fast, but it's working, and we're finding these ways so they don't have to prescribe medications to older adults. That creates a whole bunch of problems. That there's a way to help them change their habits, and so I'm super excited about it. In the lab, we are creating a curriculum for climate change professionals that's basically like my boot camp, but in a nutshell. And we're going to offer it. We've done 2 pilots over the last year, and that's working well. So now we're automating it, and we'll scale it up to hopefully save the planet. We are building off a previous class of mine, and we have a way to help people reduce screen time. Go to screentime.stanford.edu. We have the largest collection of solutions to reduce screen time, and we have a little genie, a little wizard that takes you through it and matches you with the best solution. And we reached the phase 1 of a vaccination project. So we're taking the problem of COVID vaccination, we're mapping it out in a way that's never been done before. The vaccination world hasn't used the behavior model and behavior design, so we're doing that for them and showing how to break it out in this systematic new way. And so we're done with phase 1, and we're waiting for feedback to decide on what phase 2 will be. So I think we'll move that forward then to be designing solutions based on what the problems is. And we're able to define the problem clearly and systematically through the models of behavior design in a way that hasn't been done before. So vaccination, screen time, save the planet. And what I love about that is the students in Stanford, it's nice to pick like the biggest challenges and just go for it, you know, and just do the best we can.
Oh, that sounds great. I'm wondering if you've thought about, related to that, the mask behavior and habits of masks. Have you, I don't want to put you on the spot,
funny.
but...
Yeah, it's funny you would bring that up this video that's on behaviormodel.org, so the videos, and man, I wish the book could actually show an animation, because this is how to use the behavior model. Like, so here's the mask one. And I created this.
He does not wear a mask when shopping. He sort of believes the mask will protect him from COVID-19. However, the only mask he owns is painful to wear. So this adds up to not wearing a mask. He is below the action line. Then one day, Jake's grandma made him a mask that was comfortable, not at all painful. She gave it with a note. Please wear this to protect yourself and me. This changed things for Jake. Now, above the action line, Jake wears a mask when shopping.
Okay, and it goes on. And I wrote the script for this, I think in like February or March, before it became super political. I had a sense that people were going to call others sheep. That was just barely happening. Somebody wrote me 2 weeks ago and said, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're against mask wearing. What's up with your video? And I'm like, what? I wore a mask. I went and did a podcast with Dax Shepard, and that was late January. I was wearing a mask through LAX and everything. So I was like the only one of 3 people. So I'm totally into masks. So it kind of was weird. So we've looked at this video again and thought, man, do we need to change it? So because somebody thought I was on the non-mask side of things. So yes, absolutely, Dan, it can be used for that. It can be used for any challenge. One of the fun things, but also frustrating things, is once you learn to like analyze a behavior clearly and design for it effectively, what are you going to work on, right? And there's all these things you can, so then you have to prioritize really hard. So I invite all of you to learn more about behavior design and then tackle some of these. It's really not that hard to take the models of behavior design and analyze the vaccination problem. It's not that hard to do. And to come up with insights and opportunities that haven't been within the normal field of academic vaccination or immunization, that they just don't look at it in that way. They just don't have a systematic lens for looking at behavior. So I invite all of you to dive in and start some of these problems like adherence that seem intractable and impossible. When you break it down, it then becomes like a solvable challenge. Now, that said, for certain people not wearing masks, going to that, Dan, if somebody's identity is tied up with not wearing a mask, that's like the toughest nut to crack. And unfortunately, thanks to certain leaders in our country, a lot of people have that identity. And that is a very tough problem now. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, let's
Sorry if I
transition
offended
audience.
people, but it's the truth.
Yeah. Let's transition audience questions. There's one kind of related to that, which is, what are some of the biggest challenges in subconscious behavior change versus conscious behavior change? I mean, actually, you know what? I meant, I meant Benjamin asked it. I meant to let Benjamin actually ask it. So for this Q&A section, if you want to unmute, you're welcome to come in and ask your question. So sorry, if you're here, Benjamin, you want to ask.
Welcome, Benjamin.
Yeah.
Hey, good evening. I thought you did a great job asking it. I'm just curious on understanding any way that would be helpful in thinking about the difference between an unconscious behavior change versus a conscious behavior change, and that some of them, take years to develop, are negatively impacting us, and some, might be like hiding in plain sight. And if the behavior model still applies to unconscious behaviors, or if it's only, kind of like behaviors that we're actively aware of. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on that. That's a really important topic. I'm an expert on maybe a little piece of it, and it has to do with self-talk, which is, I guess, an unconscious or subconscious behavior. And within Tiny Habits, there's a technique called celebration, where you cause yourself to feel successful, feel the emotion of success, which I call shine. And there's techniques for it. And what seems to be true, and I haven't run a true experiment with control conditions, but I've had thousands of people do the method and report back, is that as they learn to fire off this emotion of shine, yes, they can do it to wire in habits, but they also do it at other parts of their life. So that then generalizes, including to the self-talk. And in fact, the thing that I was about 4 months into teaching tiny habits, this was 2011, and I'm teaching people through email. I'm emailing a few hundred people a week. And a woman, and this is in the book, I call her Rhonda in the book. Her name was actually Linda, but I changed it because my sister's name Linda and she's in the book. Rhonda emailed me and said, oh my gosh, BJ, thanks to you, I now realize I've endured a lifetime of self-trash talk. And I just pushed myself away from the kitchen table where I was, and I was like, oh my gosh. Because that was not the world I was living in, with Stanford people, or I was just a dunce and wasn't aware of it. And then I started seeing in the habiteers, so habiteers are people that do tiny habits, in the habiteers I was coaching, that this was pervasive. And so Rhonda's comment, Linda/Rhonda's comment, tuned me into that and then I started measuring some other things in the 5-day program, like a sense of identity change. I'm now the kind of person who, and so on. And so I do believe, and the Tiny Habits Research Lab can do a true experiment to show causality. But the hypothesis is when people learn to celebrate on demand, it also changes the negative chatter they have in their head. So that's the little piece of it that I think I have some expertise on, but not the broader issue.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks, BJ. Glad to be here.
Thanks for the question, Benjamin.
All right, our next question is from Andrew. Andrew, if you want to unmute, and feel free to turn your camera on if you want. You can.
Hey, BJ.
Hey.
Thanks so much for being here. So my question is about how to think about behavior change in an organization, right? Like a notoriously hard problem if you think about like, hey, we can see a better way for our product organization, for example, to operate. Something I've had a lot of frustration with over the years. And I'm just wondering, how do you think about applying your model on sort of a larger scale within a team, for example, instead of just changing my own behavior?
I love the question. And a lot of people have used my work for that. But it's more than the behavior model, okay? So the starting point, so it's really the steps of behavior design. So that's why when people say, oh, I love your model, I know everything about your model. And it's like, no, it's really a system. It's behavior design. It's a system of models and methods, and they work together. The behavior model is just one thing. So the first step is get clear on what is we want. Do we want more communication? Do we want people to express more gratitude? Do we want greater employee retention? So you first get clear on what are we designing for. Then you magic wand, what are the behaviors that would lead to this? And you come up with a whole bunch of them. And there's kind of a rubric for being coming up with a lot of potential behaviors. Then you crispify them. That's what I skipped in the book. You make them very specific, and then you prioritize them using a method that I call focus mapping. So the 30 or 40 behaviors we came up with to, let's say the objective was to have more laughters and smiles at work. So I worked on that before. We want more laughters and smiles at work. So of the 40 different ways to create more, which ones are the ones we're going to choose? And you choose based on 3 criteria. There's a sorting process, but it really comes down to 3 criteria. Impact, which ones are going to be effective? And it's not binary, it's a degree of effectiveness. 2, which ones do our employees want to do? That's motivation. And which ones can our employees do? That's ability. So of the 40 behaviors that will lead to this outcome or this culture change that we want, then you systematically derive which 1, 2, or 3 behaviors. And then once you know the behaviors, then you go here. Then it's like, okay, if we want people to share their funniest movie every coffee break, great. Are they motivated to do that? Sure. Do they have the ability? Well, maybe not. Let's write instructions. Do they have a prompt? No, we got to prompt them. So this comes into play once you know what the behavior is. Now, sometimes you can guess at the behavior, especially if it's for your own life, but for something like an organization, you want to go through the steps of behavior design and be systematic. So you're not just guessing. You're not just listening to a TED Talk and saying, oh, meditation at the start of every meeting is our answer. That's a guess. Instead, use a system. And that's what's kind of exciting. That's why you can look at something really hard and go, I don't know the answer, but I have a system for finding it. And I have a system for designing the behavior and a system for testing it. So that's how you would tackle that. Yeah.
Terrific. Thank you.
All right. So, next up, thanks, Andrew, for the question. We have Rajiv. Rajiv, if, oops.
Yeah. Hey.
Hey.
Thanks, PJ. This is awesome. So my question is around behavior to help people stop doing something. So specifically like substance abuse, tobacco, or even staying up late and being on YouTube, Netflix. How do you use behavior change to help someone stop do something?
I love this question. This is so good. So my work in Tiny Habits has been primarily about helping people create habits. And I think I've coached more than anybody in the world on this, like stop counting at 40,000, you know, lots and lots and lots. Stopping unwanted habits is different. It will always come back to these things. It always comes back to this, okay, everything. But for stopping a behavior, you want to remove motivation, remove ability, or remove the prompt, okay? For it to happen, you want to make sure those things are all there and reinforced with emotion. So for some behaviors, if they're simple enough, like, oh, I want to stop looking at my phone in the middle of the night. Well, take your phone and move it out of the bedroom where you make it harder to do. I mean, there are some that are kind of straightforward like that. But for the kinds of habits you're talking about, I'm suggesting a different way of thinking about it. And rather than break bad habits, and I have a chapter on this, I show you're untangling bad habits. So something like, let's say, media use, digital technology use is not just one habit. It's a whole bunch of different habits. Maybe you scroll first thing in the morning in bed. You watch Netflix while you're having breakfast, etc. So think of those as a bunch of tangles. And I don't have a visual aid, but imagine I had a little phone cord here that was all tangled up. That's how to think about these kinds of habits. And so another way to visualize it is this exact same way. That this is my habit of overuse of social media. Oh, I scroll in the morning. I watch it over breakfast. I sit in the park and do Instagram or TikTok or whatever. And then you take not the hardest tangle, but the easiest tangle. So let's say there's 12 different things you typically do. You take the easiest one and you get rid of it. And you can use Tiny Habits for this, or you can just go straight here and say, can I remove the motivation? Probably not. Okay, because I'm bored or I want to be. So good. Can I make it harder to do? Yeah, maybe. Can I remove the prompt? Yeah, maybe. So you pick the easiest one and you untangle that. And then you go to the next easiest one. So it's a process. And notice it's acknowledging that things we call bad habits tend to be not just one thing, but a tangle of things. Whether that's media use or drinking or smoking or snacking or, getting upset with your kids. And then by saying untangle rather than break, you're setting the expectation that it's a process. Break is not a process. Break is like, boom, it's done. It's broken. It's a process. And then I also like, and if I had the visual aid, it'd make a better point, that even though it looks so impossible at the beginning, like your phone cord all tangled up, if you just start with the easiest one and you keep going, you will get there. So not only does it imply, just changing the word, that it's a process, if people rely on their previous experience untangling stuff, it's like, oh, I know I can get there, even though it seems impossible to start. Bam. And so I think hopefully it is a hopeful reframing of how you tackle things like this. Now, in the back of the book, Tiny Habits, so that was a quick summary, and I'll share this because this is one of the things that I'll go here. I didn't think there is a very, very popular book out there that on the front cover says a proven way to break bad habits. Guess what, people? There is no proven way to break bad habits. It's complicated. And anybody, despite selling 1 million books or being very popular, they do not have a proven way to break bad habits. Even if it's on the cover of their book, they're misleading you. So when I read that book, which came out a little bit before mine, and I realized the book didn't give really any guidance on bad habits. It's like 4 pages, and not very interesting. I then dug in. I was like, oh, because I hadn't intended my book to look very much at bad habits, because my data and the vast majority of my experience is helping people create them. But then I took behavior design and I mapped out, and I'm super, this is the most content dense part of the book, where there are 3 phases in the behavior change master plan. So if you want to untangle a bad habit, you do phase 1. Phase 1 is create good habits, new habits. That's phase 1. Sometimes that releases them. Phase 2 is to figure out the tangle and untangle one by one. And if that still doesn't get you where you want to be, phase 3 is swapping. Swapping is the last phase, not the first phase. You will be told by bloggers and so on that the only way to stop a bad habit is swap on. That is not true. It's part of my system, but it comes at the end. Okay, it comes when the other things hadn't worked. So each of these flow charts draws on motivation, ability, prompt, and my publisher would not let me put these in the text of the book. I'm a person that thinks this way. I think you are too. I think you're my, so I think you might kind of dig the flow charts and how it's very systematic. And if this works, go here. If it doesn't work, go here, and so on. So it's a much harder problem than creating habits. Creating habits is relatively easy compared to these kinds of habits that are just entrenched and people have struggled with and they have emotional baggage. We need a lot more innovation in the space, and I am cheering on and helping people make progress in this space. I'm not a medical doctor and I'm not a psychiatrist, so I haven't felt like that was my thing, but I am a behavior designer and I can bring behavior design to the problem and map it out and untangle it in ways that hopefully really open the door for both practitioners and people struggling with these kinds of habits. So.
Thanks, appreciate it. That's great. I love that.
Thanks, Rajiv, for your question. All right, next up we have Laura.
So, hey, so BJ, you alluded to this earlier, but I'm curious. Oh, now I have a cat in my.
A friend, okay.
When we're thinking about designing for habits or for behavior change, it's easy to think about what we want someone to do and for us to use these methods to make them do also what they want to do in the short term. But it might be, and this is what I think you alluded to earlier, that those behaviors may end up being things that they really don't want to do, or lead to behaviors that they didn't intend. Like, so to use Facebook as the example, I really want to be connected to people, and that's a great thing to want to do. Yeah. But then do I really want my data to be used in this way, or to become extremely polarized or something like that? So if we're designing to try to help people, how do we anticipate those kinds of risks?
Yeah, it's a really, I mean, you're going kind of the core to the crux of such an important matter. In my Persuasive Technology book from 2002, I have a chapter on ethics, and I have what I call a stakeholder analysis. Here's how you walk through that. But at that point, I was thinking about persuasion, which I don't think the key is persuasion for lasting change. Persuasion may be to get people to vote a certain way or do one-time behaviors, but habits and engagement are different. And it's really about helping people do what they want to do. I think in general, that if you're helping people do what they already want to do, you're on pretty safe ethical ground, but not always. And it's that not always that worries me. And I think that's your question as well. And I don't think there's any perfect answer for that, because the things we make can have unintended consequences. The idea for Instagram started in my class, and when Bourbon didn't work, Mikey pivoted and reclaimed this idea from class. And so I know, I mean, they didn't actually build it. They put it into slides and they conceptually designed it. the intentions were the best of intentions. And I think the early days of Instagram really were very good and uplifting, but it's become a very different creature. And it has a really dark underbelly to it. I don't think I have the wisdom to give you a perfect answer to that challenge. I think in my own life, I'll just answer from a personal perspective. I think if I'm operating from a position of caring, concern, generosity, trying to help people, if there's a negative side effect of what I do, of course I'm really sorry about that, but my intentions were good. And yeah, be thoughtful. Like, could this go astray? And if there's signs it's going astray, then do something about it. I think that's how I do it personally. You know, am I helping people do what they already want to do? And I'm helping them feel successful. I'm quite sure that as I give people that feeling of success, I am benefiting them, regardless of what the product is. So I'm sure that's true. But something like, oh, I got involved with Facebook because it helped me feel connected, and now it's my source of news, and I'm addicted, and I get up in the middle of the night and do it. I don't have a perfect answer to prevent that. So that's, I guess, my answer. It's like we just do the best we can, and I guess personally, if I'm coming from a position of trying to help people, and then if things go wrong, I'm going to feel bad, but not terribly bad, I guess. I don't know.
I have one thought that just came to mind, which is in the case of Facebook and now Instagram, their customers aren't the people who we're talking about here. And so it may be really understanding that there's that you
who
can't
benefits.
You can't really design for your user if your customer is not your user.
It's such a good point. And, you know, I haven't looked at my ethics chapter in the Persuasive Tech book, but there is this there's a framework, and part of it's like who benefits. And then maybe I should look at that again. But I've kind of moved on from designing technology products, and I'm just, you know, working with wellness companies. Yes, I have people in my boot camp that are designing digital products for sure, but I'm teaching them about behavior change, not about the specifics of, you know, put the button here and have user flow be like that. And then in my own research and work, it's really about, wow, how do we help people that are pre-diabetic, or, you know, it's more about health and financial security. And I just haven't been in those waters of, you know, this is going to be, I mean, I'll give an example in the health space. I guess people with asthma, there's this thing called a rescue inhaler. So if you have like an acute, I'm not even smart enough to tell you what it is. You use the rescue inhaler and it resolves it quickly. That's not how people are supposed to manage their asthma. I think it's called a corticosteroid, and you do it once a day, or you can get an injection or something like that. But anyway, because the rescue inhaler resolves the problem so quickly, it wires in as a habit. It's the emotion, it's the relief people get from using the rescue inhaler that makes it their go-to treatment, and that's not what they should be doing. So I'm sure whoever invented the rescue inhaler had the best of intentions, but to now know that millions and millions of people are now addicted to the rescue inhaler and they're not managing their asthma in the optimal way, that's a problem, right? So that's an example of, in the health space, of unintended consequence, because it was so effective. I mean, it's a pernicious habit. And as soon as I worked with the first company years ago on this, I was like, oh, this is going to wire in really quickly for these reasons, boom, boom, boom. And then they won't think of doing the regular asthma management because the rescue inhaler has just been so effective in the moment, giving them that emotional, it's a net gain in positive emotions. That's what wires in the habit, a net gain of positive emotions. It's giving them that. And so I'm working with one team on trying to solve that problem right now. So You can have the best of intentions. Dan, I've kind of gone on and on. You said you got a great group here and they would hang out. I so appreciate it.
Yeah. We
But
have time for one more question or no?
yeah, let's do that.
Okay, cool. So last question. Priya, you had a question. If you want to hop on, feel free. Let's see, Priya,
well, I'll jump in and answer Natalie's question. Natalie, we have just started in Mighty Networks. I didn't want it on Facebook. We started a group that we call Tiny Habits for Kids. It's for parents and teachers and other people who want to help kids have great habits. It's not for kids, but we're calling it Tiny Habits for Kids. We just launched it 2 weeks ago. I have 50 trained coaches in the platform now, and we're getting a little more prepared. And then we're going to invite people from the public in. So you could certainly join that. And that is going to be a destination and a community, we hope, that helps with questions like this. You'll have experts that will know how to help adolescent mental health during the epidemic and help do that. So I'm super excited about that. And yeah, so that's the answer. So stay tuned. Ping me maybe in 2 weeks or watch my Twitter posts. I'll share a way to get invited to that community.
Awesome. Sounds great, BJ. Cool. All right. Last question, Priya, if you want to ask your question, please.
Thank you for the opportunity. And it's been really emotional just listening to your experience. I come from a healthcare background and work in the healthcare space. And I keep reading about how to positively motivate users to behave. But there are certain actions which are inherently uncomfortable to do, like exercise or wake up on time because you're tempted. So I've been reading about how to incorporate nudges, and I would like to hear how you would suggest we do that and build that into your model.
Yeah. So the way I would think about that, it's different than, so if somebody wants to have more energy, there's a whole bunch of different behaviors they can do to have more energy, or lose weight, or read more. There's a whole bunch of different ones. So I call this swarm of bees. But if there's a behavior they must do, I call that queen bee. So that you got swarm of bees for many, many things. But if it's guess what? This is a non-negotiable. You need to check your blood sugar level. That's a queen bee behavior, and that's different. And in those cases, yes, you make it really, really easy to do. Yes, you make sure there's a prompt. And then for queen bee behaviors, you've got to mess around with motivation, a lot like the mom did with the kids in the laundry. And there's no one magical approach, and it's going to be different for different people, because what will ultimately motivate somebody to stick their finger and draw blood and measure it every day, it's going to be different, not in 100 different ways, but there's going to be different psychologies. And you've got to account for that and figure out, how do we align this unpleasant behavior with something they really want to do, something that's really meaningful and important? You do that in conjunction with rearranging their environment. So the good behaviors are easy to do and the bad behaviors are harder and impossible to do. But for those kinds of behaviors, that now has a name, it's called queen bee. And queen bees are special cases. And they certainly exist in the financial world and the health world. One of the hypotheses I have, I see this all the time in Tiny Habits, but I haven't applied exactly here. When people start doing habits, no matter how small, and they feel successful, it then leads to other changes in their life. The vast majority of people within 5 days report they've changed other things. And 18% on average during a 5-day course of Tiny Habits that we offer every week report they've changed some big thing in their life. So you do get these ripple effects from these tiny changes if they feel successful. So the hypothesis here is, hey, if somebody needs to do this queen bee behavior, and we could run a true experiment on this, is that person will open themselves to doing this behavior that's less motivating for them if they're changing in other ways, and if they see themselves, I'm the kind of person who can change. I'm the kind of person who can follow through. Those things happen from even the 5-day program. So that would be the hypothesis, is you would have a control group where you just tell them, hey, do the finger prick, measure this, or whatever you want them to do. And then you have a group that they get the same message of do this, but they're also being guided in how to change and succeed in creating these tiny changes in their life. And then you would measure the results of the two. And the hypothesis is that the people that are feeling successful and changing, even in small ways, are more likely to do the queen bee behavior. So that's how, no perfect answer. I mean, for many of the behavior challenges that you're facing, or your patients are facing, or your company's facing, if there were a simple answer, you would have found it by now. Okay, so you can rest assured that if it was really simple, you would have found it. But you can look at the problem systematically through the lenses of behavior design, and you can tackle it systematically, and then find a way to you won't get 100% of the patients doing the finger stick, but you'll find a way to get as many as you can for that.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I do get what you're saying. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. So, and there's a lot of nuances and edges around that, but thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. I knew this would be fun, but it's been even more fun than I thought, and you got me to go places that I didn't really expect, but I'm super happy that I've shared this with you.
Great, BJ. It was an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for being with us and being so generous with your time and advice with us. Really appreciate that.